It should come as no surprise when I say that media as a whole has a very long way to go when it comes to minority representation. But mad, some of you may be saying, we have movies like The Black Panther, Shang-Chi, and Hush. Also, there's LGBTQ plus representation in shows like Modern Family. You can also easily find minority subgenres on streaming platforms like Hulu and Netflix now, so why are so many minorities still complaining about representation? While we are lucky enough to live in a digital age where we have access to seemingly endless troves of indie and big budget films and shows, having representation does not equate to having equal or even good representation. A decent example of this can be found in one of Netflix's top trending titles, The Witcher. For anyone who is not familiar with the franchise, The Witcher began its life as a dark fantasy book series and short story series by Andrzej Sapkowski. The books follow Geralt, a magical monster hunter who travels the world rescuing people, towns, cities, etc. from whatever beastie may be getting them down. Although the Witcher book series did very well on its own, the popularity of its amazing characters and the series as a whole skyrocketed once the stories were adapted into video games. When most people who have even the simplest working knowledge of the Witcher series hear that name, The Witcher, it's very likely that this image comes to mind. Well, at least it did until he started looking like Henry Cavill. Still, this stony appearance and that snarky, reluctant hero attitude that Geralt was given in the games caused fantasy fans the world over to carve out a little Witcher-sized hole in their heart for this lovable rogue to fill. Now that we have the basics out of the way, it's time to discuss the main topic at hand: how Netflix's The Witcher got disability representation so dead wrong, and how they screwed up so royally that it's doubtful they can ever fully bounce back from it. The remainder of this video will be formatted similarly to a Twitch stream, so I can get my mostly unedited and raw thoughts out to you, and because it makes it easier for me to show you the articles I'll be discussing, so bear with me. On the whole, most people prefer that an adaptation of someone else's work be presented as closely to the source material as possible. Although we are beginning to learn as a society now that if you're doing something from like a book to a TV show or movie, or from a movie to a stage production, some changes do absolutely have to be made because those are not the same media types, so they need different things. That being said, each time you take a story and you adapt it to a new media form, you are given endless opportunities to change that story for the better, to fill any plot holes, to make flat characters a little more dynamic and interesting, which means that because this was a Netflix adaptation and they had free control to basically do whatever they wanted to with the characters and with the story as a whole, they were given ample opportunity to change the aspects of her character that people were bothered by already. But rather than doing that, they actually ended up making her worse overall. They made a depiction of her that is, by and large, the least well-liked of any that's ever existed. Because the thing is, when you look at Reddit threads for the Witcher book series, or just anyone's articles as a whole, while people don't always feel super happy with the way her disability was portrayed, they argue tooth and nail that it was not exploited in the book series the way that it was in the TV show. Now, the games are not wholly without sin either, because the games just basically decided to make her perfect. And if you've read the books, even after Yennefer is made more normal in appearance, she always has issues with her body. Her disability never fully goes away. You can even find in an article from Game Rant, while her deformities had been corrected, her body's proportions still had minor issues, something that was put into the spotlight when Geralt held her by the shoulders, only to notice that her shoulders weren't even. So no matter what she's done in her life, she still had some form of disability. He noticed it, but we're not going to make a huge deal about it. It's just something that was observed. End of story. Now we come to a lot of really good articles I found that explain in detail why so many disabled people were bothered by Yennefer's portrayal in the Netflix series. I don't want anyone going after the actress and having a go at her. Honestly, the producers, the showrunners, the director, all these people should have done more research, and especially the script writers, before portraying her that way. That doesn't mean she's completely without fault. but a majority of the blame can't only be rested on her shoulders. So let's get into this. So the first article we're going to be taking a look at is from weareyourvoicemag.com. And this was one of the best ones that I found on this subject. Yennefer's ascension into a fully fledged sorceress requires her to, rather painfully, remove her uterus and undergo an agonizing transformation into a conventionally beautiful version of herself, one she has always dreamt of. The show's sudden erasure of Yen's disability is so blatantly ableist and leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Her first entrance into court as a sorceress was meant to strike the same awe in the show's audience as it did the guests in the ballroom. However, as a disabled woman, my thoughts were with the other disabled viewers and the negative impact this could have in the minds of the disabled community. Clearly, Yen's condition and physical impairment were written as undesirable, as illustrated when the man performing the procedure told her, "You are a first draft of what nature intended." Thus, she is rid of her impairments at the show's earliest convenience, like a snake shedding its skin, to make space for a more desirable physical body. This butterfly to her previous self's caterpillar is one without physical handicaps. Therefore, the message this sends to viewers that disabilities can and should be cast off is harmful and unacceptable. This further asserts the harmful trope that disabled people would willingly choose to subject themselves to extreme discomfort if it means they could be able-bodied. The way this scene was shot almost reflected a phoenix rising from the ashes of the broken and discarded body. Her assertion to endure this operation while awake instead of being put to sleep, as the surgeon suggested, also lays the foundation that her character's determination and free will without acknowledging this is built upon her disability being discarded. This is one of those times where you can tell that the writers are able-bodied people who have never had to deal with a permanent physical disability, especially one that is immediately visible to the people around them. Because I completely agree with what this writer said. They do get rid of it at the show's earliest convenience. There was nothing wrong with her being disabled, or even with, because this is a fantasy setting, them trying to get rid of the physical disability at some point. Because it's a fantasy concept in this case, it's a little different from your typical fiction stories, where they just decide the person's, no longer in a wheelchair or no longer blind or something because they're better now, and it's just disgusting and makes no sense. But there's a couple ways this could have been done better. One, not doing this immediately. Like the writer says, it was done way too quickly and made it seem like her disability was a bad thing and was the only thing holding her back, and that her being disabled made her lesser than the other characters and lesser even than her future self, which absolutely is harmful to the disabled community. That was the first thought that came to my mind and all of my disabled friends' minds when we saw that ballroom scene. It really bothered us, and honestly, I kind of watched in and out after that. I didn't sit through another entire episode beyond that point because it was so painful seeing a TV show that is this well regarded and has this high of ratings treat the disabled community like this. It's really abhorrent. So having her disability shown a little longer in the show than it was would have greatly benefited the character and the viewership of the disabled community. On top of that, if you were insistent that because she eventually, in all other forms of media, has shucked her disability, that you needed to do that in the Netflix series, which I argue you didn't. Because it's a new adaptation, they could have kept her disabled and kind of shown the audience the hardships that come with a disability at the hands of just your own inner turmoil and being frustrated when you can't do something that the people around you can, or the accessibility issues that exist in every world, even a fantasy setting, and the hardships at the hands of people who don't care enough to understand the disability and want to treat you as lesser. They could have kept it if they wanted and made it a really good learning tool for their audience. But if they insisted upon getting rid of it, they should have made it so that although she may be more conventionally attractive now, there's some kind of punishment that came along with it, that she has to constantly endure some kind of suffering because of that choice that she made, much more so than any suffering she's gone through so far, to show the audience that this was not something that should have happened. This was a bad thing. Moving on in this article, amongst female mages, femininity and hypersexuality is idealized as it's viewed as an advantage in the Witcher's cutthroat political landscape. Aptly so, because female mages are expected to use their beauty to sway the male monarchs they advise. "We're just vessels," she muses during a particularly emotional scene. When the council finds out she has elven blood, she is discriminated against and even demoted, reminiscent of many POC experiences in non-fictional workplaces. Yennefer, after decades of her worth being reduced to her appearance, grows quickly tired of this vapid lifestyle. Despite the council's discovery of her elven ancestry, without her transformation, she would never have secured employment due to her visible disability and the discomfort it brings others. Tissaya's words to her, "Even if you were beautiful," implies that she isn't. When Tissaya asks Yen to imagine the most beautiful woman in the world, that woman is able-bodied. Upon discussion, someone told me they were surprised when Yennefer first introduced herself because Yennefer in the games was hot. Her disability was not what most consider desirable because to most beauty and disability are mutually exclusive. Before her ascension, Tissaya tells Yennefer to kill the victim in the mirror. This single line of dialogue highlights the way able-bodied people view disabled people. Tissaya victimizes her because she thinks Yennefer has victimized herself. In her eyes, Yennefer is inherently infantile because of her physical impairments, despite her being a grown woman capable of making her own decisions. This is something that happens constantly to disabled people, again, especially people with visible disabilities. I can't count the amount of times myself and my friends with visible physical disabilities have been stopped on the side of the road, in the grocery store, at the movies, wherever we are, by random strangers who want to touch us or start loudly praying over us because apparently we're too broken and God needs to fix us. Whether they're saying they're trying to tell us that we're an inspiration for literally just doing what everyone else does, like buying food, I don't see how that's inspiring. That shows that they see us as lesser even when they're trying to be nice. And what she just wrote here also perfectly depicts how frustrating it is that whether they're people in your family, your friends group, your workplace, out in public, anywhere, people will always treat you like a little kid, like because you're disabled, they have to take care of you. When if it's a grown adult, they will tell you if they need help. If I need you to hold the door open, I will let you know. If I need you to grab something for me on a top shelf, I will let you know. Don't rush in front of me and just decide you know better than I do what I'm going to need in that moment in time. That is not a kind thing to do like people think it is. When in doubt, ask the person if they need help and accept it if they say that they don't. There are countless incidents where disabled people are offered assistance when they haven't asked. Yup, sometimes even after they've refused it. Yeah. This removes our agency and strips away our choice, forcing disabled people to feel grateful for assistance even if it's unwarranted and makes us feel uncomfortable. It stirs a hero mentality in able-bodied people, as is further portrayed with Tissaya and Yennefer. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing Tissaya, by the way. Now we come to another aspect of Yennefer's character that this author writes that really bothers me. It bothered me to begin with, but again, they could have taken this part out, and I don't think it would have impacted the overall Netflix story that much, or they could have just tweaked it a little bit. You had the power. I'm going to keep coming back to that. They had the power to do whatever they wanted with the story, and they chose to keep this anyway. Yennefer's attempted suicide is another overplayed and destructive depiction. While disabled people are no less susceptible to mental illness, Yen's attempt to end her life unfolds as a result of her disability. This idealizes suicide as an escape from her disability, a way to break free from the damaged body which has brought her hardship and shame. This idea is extremely inaccurate and detrimental to the images able-bodied people have of disabled people. This is another thing, like, ask any disabled person who also suffers from mental illness, and I can almost guarantee you that they will say that at some point when they've brought up their depression, their anxiety, their whatever, people around them automatically assume it has to do with their disability. They automatically want to jump to that conclusion and tell them that, oh, they're still so wonderful, and like, don't let your disability get you down, even though mental illness can manifest for a variety of reasons. And most of the time, if mental illness in a disabled person does directly link to their disability, it isn't because of the disability itself. Rather, it is because of the way they're being treated by the people around them as a result of them having a disability. Never assume that a disabled person feels broken. There are yet more instances where Yen grapples with disability. Her struggle with infertility, led by her initiation procedure, is an arguably relevant take. Perhaps this is a commentary on the unwavering pressure and stigma which follows women unable to bear children, but it seems to be the only well-developed aspect of her character's interactions with disabilities. I agree with that as well. Infertility can be extremely painful to a person who used to have a uterus and now doesn't, or who does have one and it is barren. Whether you are someone who has always wanted to bear your own children, or someone who's never ever wanted to get pregnant, once that choice is taken away from you, it is extremely painful and difficult to grapple with, because regardless of emotionally where you sat with that issue, your hormones and your body kind of goes through this, but we were supposed to make and have babies, so why can we not kind of moment after that. And a lot of people just do not understand it. I do agree that out of any of her disability stuff, that has been handled the best, and that is another carryover from other forms of media. Now we come to an article from Film Goblin. This one was pretty great because they wrote it in a different style from the last one that I just read for you. They kind of go about it from the point of view at first of someone who is annoyed by all the disabled people claiming that Yennefer's character is inherently ableist, and trying to appeal to them. So it's going to have a few more jokes and stuff at the beginning. The Witcher's ableist controversy. Even though the producers behind The Witcher on Netflix went out of their way to make sure the show is properly diverse and woke, it looks like they forgot to check if they dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's on that, because the series is being accused of helping to promote ableism. Ableism, noun, discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. On the show, one of the main characters is the hot and sexy Yennefer, arguably how people see her in the games. However, she was born ugly and a hunchback. At one point, she seeks out the help and has her hunchback corrected, which starts her down the path of becoming a powerful magic user, sort of like a Middle-earth version of the Swan. Oh my goodness, the Swan. Disabled advocates are upset with how this goes down on the show and are accusing its producers of ableism by telling people that those who have deformities need to change and be fully abled in order to be successful and rise above their disability. They are going so far as to say people need to be warned about the ableism plotline before watching the show. And you want to know something? They're right. You shouldn't have to conform to society's standards and look a certain way in order to be able to go down the path of success. Just because you can't walk a certain way or talk differently doesn't mean you're not worthy and should be cast off like a piece of trash by society. The character of Yennefer is just helping to promote this attitude. I remember being surprised they went down this path with the character the first time I saw her character intro video prior to the show's debut. Placing a warning before the show is going too far, but what people are complaining about the show doing is true, and disabled people have the right to be upset about it. And there's a tweet here. The answer is, I will not deviate from the book's races and cultures, which means I will include minorities. The trap people fall into is equating minority with skin color. Note, people saw the writer's room picture I tweeted and railed, why so diverse? Why no Europeans? For a production that wanted the world to know how great they thought they were for all the diversity both in front of and behind the camera, they really messed this one up. I agree. For all the reasons we've already stated. And we've got one more article to look at, and this one is from the Mary Sue. And whether you generally agree with the Mary Sue's takes or not, they are very well-crafted articles. So this one is called, We Need to Talk About the Witcher's Yennefer, Magic, Disability, and Motherhood. Yennefer of Vengerberg, one of the three main characters in Netflix's Witcher series, is disabled. A main character in a prominent fantasy series with a visible disability. More than that, she's a love interest. As a disabled person, I was really excited to see a disabled character whose storyline doesn't revolve around her disability, and who's allowed to have a romantic and sexual relationship as part of her narrative. Sure, I knew she'd be played by an able-bodied actress, but I thought it could still be interesting representation. Yennefer's story begins when a young couple stealing away to kiss behind an indeterminate farm building catches her spying on them. She's berated and bullied, first by them and then by her father. Tisaya, the headmistress of a mage school, Artusa, shows up at her parents' farm and buys Yennefer for 4 marks, less than the price of a pig. Upon arrival at Artusa, she immediately smashes a mirror and attempts suicide. It's a much less dignified entrance into the show than either of the other 2 main characters, Geralt the Witcher and Cirilla the Princess, are afforded. Yennefer is introduced a full episode later than they are, and we immediately see her at her lowest point. Geralt as a Witcher also has much of the show's world pitted against him, but when some of the patrons at the bar take issue with his presence, another character comes to his defense. There is no such defense for Yennefer. Yennefer spends a portion of the next episode training to hone her magic, with a crop of other young girls who've shown potential. Some of them excel at their lessons while others struggle, and Yennefer generally seems to fall into the latter camp, earning consistent chastising and the nickname Piglet from Tisaya. In her interludes with Istred in the catacombs, she laments that she thought maybe this was something she could be good at. At this point, it seems Yennefer might have narrowly avoided the trope of disability as a superpower, in which a disabled character develops a special ability as a result of their disability. Think Matt Murdock for Daredevil, or Bran Stark from Game of Thrones. Almost immediately, though, Istred offers to practice with her, and she gets the hang of it literally right away, no training montage even necessary. After all, she excels at just about everything she tries. This is yet another one of those areas where I say if you really wanted to stick with the original narrative of her beginning disabled and then becoming able-bodied, or even keeping some of her disability like she does in the book series, this was one of those times you could have done it. First of all, slow down. Nobody in the disability community appreciates that disability as a superpower trope. It is very annoying. It's showing that the only time you should care about a disabled person is if they're useful to you, and that's not the case. We should be afforded the same care and respect as anybody else in the world. But the excelling at everything she tries thing, so even if it turned out that she was going to be really gifted in magic, that could have been one of those things where you could have kept her disability permanently in this series. You could have shown that people generally see this disabled woman coming and they want to mock her, they want to berate her, they want to harm her, and immediately she just unleashes a fury of magic on them and commands respect from those around her. That would show the audience that this disabled character is not to be messed with. And again, because it's a fantasy setting, you could kind of get away with that. It wouldn't so much be disability as a superpower. It would be her adapting to her situations with something she innately has already. Later, when she learns some old-school elven magic from Istred and performs the spell successfully on her first try, we learn that she's a quarter elf, which is presumably why she's so good at magic, but also apparently why she's disabled. Oh well. On top of that, there's a lot of issues with the show's treatment of elven characters, stemming mostly from the fact that the writers seem to want them to be allegorical for indigenous peoples without actually taking a strong stance on whether the kingdoms that slaughtered them and took their land are good or bad. The show tries to argue the morals aren't so cut and dry, but I think it's pretty clearly cut and dry. This is made worse by the apparent revelation that if an elf and a human have a child, the child will be disabled and reviled by society. Now, this is something that I've only seen this article tackle, and it's very important because it's another trope, arguably one of the most harmful, because this is a sentiment that is very much alive today. Even in the 21st century, we still have people who think this way. It's this generally religious idea that if you have a child who is disabled, it is a punishment for either your own wrongdoings earlier in life or that child's wrongdoings in a past life. And that is such a sickening way to view disabled people. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what walk of life you're from. If you truly believe someone is disabled because it is payment or atonement for the sins of their past or their parents' past, you're a terrible person and you need to check yourself. You need to do a lot of soul searching as to why you think that. It's basically a get out of jail free card to treat disabled people poorly. and to truly believe that they deserve that treatment because they must have done something bad before. Those were basically the sum of the articles I wanted to share with you today. I really hope that if you were either annoyed by people who were upset about Yennefer being ableist, or one of those people who honestly thought that there was no issue whatsoever with her character, that by watching this video and listening to what me, someone with visible disabilities, had to say about it, it kind of enlightened you and helped you understand, because I know I'm not alone in the disabled community. A lot of us watched to the point where she transforms in the show, and then we just never watched it again because it was just too harmful. The damage was done, and with everything they did with her in season 1, I really don't think they can ever bounce back from it. There's no way to fix what they did, because even if they tried to repair those damages, they'd have to go back and make her disabled again or something, and then it would just come off as her disability is a punishment. So if you are someone who is a writer, an artist, someone who's creating characters, and you want a diverse group of characters, and you especially want to have a disabled character, please talk to as many disabled people as you possibly can before writing them. And even after you've created that disabled character, have them proof it once more. Don't get butthurt and upset if they criticize it and say, no, this is not good representation at all. You need to fix this. It's because we're tired of seeing ourselves this way. So hopefully this helps some people out there, and this will be some kind of jumping off point for some indie creator out there who does not want to follow in the harmful footsteps of Netflix's The Witcher. That is all I have to say on this matter for right now. Thank you for watching.